All right, welcome back to the No Huddle podcast. Today we're going to be talking about most recent week of college football, getting into a bit of the first college football playoff rankings, talking about some games, big events, and what to look out for next week. So let's get right in. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the first edition of the college football playoff rankings. And I thought some of these were super interesting. I actually thought 1 through 8 were perfectly ranked. I like all of those teams where they were. The first issue that I found with it is 9 and 10 with Oregon and Notre Dame. With Oregon, they are 7 and 1. Their best win is over a 5 and 3 Northwestern team who looks mediocre at best. That's the only win over an FBS team with a 500 or better record. Everyone else has been terrible. They've lost their only big game. The Penn State win means nothing at this point. Penn State's 3 and 5. They're going to lose to Indiana this week to go 3 and 6. Their wins are Montana State, Oregon State, Penn State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Oklahoma State, and Rutgers. There's not a single ounce of quality in any of those wins. There just isn't, and they shouldn't be ranked number 8. Initial preseason bias, and they should be moved down. There are teams like Louisville. They're 7-1. They have wins over number 18 Miami and number 24 Pitt, and their only loss came to number 12 Virginia. I think that's a way better resume. I think that means they should be higher. I think because Virginia beat Louisville, I think Virginia should be higher, and I could really go on with other teams as well. Georgia Tech should be higher. Vandy, Texas, and Oklahoma can all be higher, even though all the last 3 teams have 2 losses. They've played way tougher teams. They've beaten tougher teams. They've had tougher schedules in the SEC. And it's not SEC bias. It's just the truth is that Oregon is not ranked higher. And then with Notre Dame, it simply comes to the fact that games are played for a reason. The week 1 excuse is not good enough for me because then there's no point in playing a game in week 1. Whether you move Miami up or move Notre Dame down or a combination of both, I don't really care what it is. But if there's no point in playing these games because they both have the same record and they played head-to-head, you have to put Miami higher. If you want to go off trajectory, that's stupid as well because Miami isn't any worse than Notre Dame. They have the same record and have beaten them head-to-head. So what's the point? I want to know, what's the point of playing games if it doesn't matter? They've played head-to-head. Like when Oklahoma was ranked ahead of Texas and they both had the same amount of same record, that's blasphemy. That's blasphemy. You cannot do that. Texas beat Oklahoma. Imagine if Texas was ranked lower than Vanderbilt in this poll. There'd be outrage, and rightly so. The games have to mean something. And if they don't, why bother play them? Then there's no incentive to scheduling difficult opponents. Prioritizing scheduling more confident opponents, there's 9 now instead of 8. Miami had to get rid of a home and home against South Carolina. But if it doesn't matter, don't schedule them. They have games against Notre Dame in the future. They play them next year. They have games against Auburn, who they don't look good, but Auburn can be good. What's the point of playing these games if they don't mean anything? And I think that Notre Dame should be lower, Miami should be higher, some combination of the two. And Tennessee, I think, should not be in the poll. At this point, through 10 weeks, you can't have a 3-loss team in there. I don't care that they've beaten that their 3 losses are all to top 12 teams. They haven't beaten anyone. Their best wins 5 and 4 Mississippi State. Tennessee should not be there. I think Memphis should definitely have a shot to get in there. They're 7 and 1 or 8 and 1. I thought that was interesting that there was no group of 5 teams, so they literally had to come out and say that at this moment Memphis would be the team to get in. I thought that was super interesting because there are a decent number of options in the AAC. Navy's still up there. I know they just lost, but to North Texas. Tulane's done, obviously. Or maybe they're not. They still only have one conference loss. And then there's North Texas as well. So it's interesting that they came out and said that Memphis was the group of 5 team. So with that all being said, that's my 2 cents on the college football poll. I think it's going to be super interesting to see what happens. At this moment, I think that Notre Dame is kind of a lock for the playoffs. I can't see them dropping. There is a lot of time so that they start playing badly, then hopefully they'll start plummeting, and other teams will take their spots. I'm big on Oklahoma, Texas, and Vandy having a shot at the playoffs. I think those are all 3 really dangerous teams. But that's all we're going to talk about for now. I'm excited to see how it continues, but I think it's going to be super interesting. So now I want to talk. We're going to go through game by game of some of the biggest games this week. We saw a ton of upsets. We saw 6 ranked teams fall, 3 of which being top 10 teams in Miami, Georgia Tech, and Vanderbilt. We also saw Houston, Tennessee, and Cincinnati take L's as well. Season ending for a lot of them. They don't really have, most of the teams don't have paths to the playoffs besides Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt. So Georgia Tech suffered their first loss of the season at North Carolina State. The score was 48-36. And as we've seen throughout the year, Haynes King just does it all. He left it all out of the field. Over 400 yards passing, I believe over 500 total yards. So it was a hefty chunk of rushing yards as well. 4 total touchdowns. And the same can be said for C.J. Bailey, the quarterback for North Carolina State. He had over 370 total yards and 3 total touchdowns. So a really fun shootout between two teams. Georgia Tech, I really thought they were going to run the table. Besides, in the ACC at least, I don't think they'll beat Georgia. Their schedule is really not that good. And this is a game they had to win. It's really disappointing to see. It almost feels like it's like a Miami type game, which we'll get to later. But they had the opportunity to just solidify themselves in the conference championship game, and now their fate is no longer in their own hands. They don't control their destiny anymore, and it's really shocking. But Brent Key, they've got to figure it out. I don't think they'll be penalized too much for the inevitable loss to Georgia later in the season. It's not going to mean anything in terms of conference play. We'll have to see what the other teams do. But also, shout out NC State, man. They didn't really have much to play for. They're now 2-3 in conference play. Their other win coming over Wake. That offense was fun to watch. It was tricky. It was unpredictable. You had a redshirt freshman, Jaden Scott, coming in for almost 200 yards, over 190, and a touchdown. There was a last-minute injury to Hollywood Smothers, who will probably be a top 5 running back in the draft this year. He was non-disclosed injury. He was out at the last minute. Jaden Scott came in, and he looks phenomenal. He's definitely going to be a huge piece for them in the future when Hollywood Smothers goes to the draft. And they looked fun. They looked genuinely fun, especially with nothing to play for. I mean, they still have a bowl to play for, obviously, but nothing much deeper in the season. I mean, they'll probably play in the Fenway Bowl. I don't know, something like that. Some bowl that doesn't carry too much weight to it. But yeah, so they really just came out, upset Georgia Tech, threw an entire wrench in the logistics of the ACC. You had Georgia Tech and UVA completely controlling their destiny. Georgia Tech doesn't anymore. It's now up to UVA and Duke. And the reason Duke you might not think they do, because there's a bunch of teams with 1 loss, but one of those games is UVA. So if they win out, they will be 7-1 in conference play with a win over Virginia, who's the last undefeated team in ACC play. Their loss coming to North Carolina State, but it was a non-conference game, strangely enough. They couldn't find another opponent. So Duke controls their own destiny. UVA controls their own destiny. Those two teams will play, and then you still have teams like Louisville, obviously Georgia Tech. SMU now only has 1 loss after they beat Miami. And the ACC is going to be super exciting. Georgia Tech has beaten Duke, so that gives them the tiebreaker over Duke, but they should still be hoping for slip-ups from Louisville and SMU. The reason I didn't mention Pitt there is because Georgia Tech plays Pitt. That's essentially an elimination game between those two teams. If Georgia Tech wins, Pitt's out, and they have more of a case to make the championship game. They'll probably be 7-1. If Pitt manages to win that, then the ball will be in their court, but they still have to face Miami in the last week of the season. So very interesting to see what happens in the end of the ACC season. It's super interesting along with the Big 12. They're very unpredictable. The Big 10 and SEC, we can kind of see where they're going to go. But, man, North Carolina State really, really spicing things up, and I'm here for it. I am not against this at all. All right. The next game that we will go to is Texas and Vandy. And Texas won this game 34-31, and on paper this looks like a close game. It wasn't at all. Texas jumped out early to a 17-0 lead, and they really was no coming back for Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's not programmed to play from behind. if you looked at their two previous wins against LSU and Mizzou, they didn't trail past halfway through the second quarter at all. They were scrambling. Ryan Wingo took the first play from scrimmage, 75 yards to the house. I'm sure Arch Manning appreciated the stat pad. Arch Manning ended up having a great game, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. So props to Arch Manning. I think the best word to describe his performance is comfortable and composed. I know that's 2 words. Sue me. He looked really comfortable. I remember my counterpart Anch in the first week of the season. He'd even mentioned it in the recent NFL podcast that Arch didn't look comfortable at making simple throws. He did this week. I think it shows a lot of growth under Sark. He's not NFL ready this year, but 2027, yeah, you bet your ass that he'll be a top pick. And so yeah, so Arch looked great. Pavia looked great as well towards the end of the game. Obviously, coming down from a 17-0 hole is not easy, but he was responsible for all 4 touchdowns, 3 in the air, 1 on the ground. 21 of these points came in the fourth quarter. Very much too little, too late for Vanderbilt. They ran out of time. I don't really know how they got an extra 2 points. That 2-point conversion at the end, in my opinion, was not good. And there was no clear angle to show that it was. I don't know what the SEC headquarters saw with that. Maybe they're like, hey, let's get a little parity and Texas will still win anyway. I don't know. It's fun. I mean, they almost had an onside kick at the end and they could have had a field goal to tie the game from Brock Taylor. But I don't really know what happened there. It was definitely an officiating meltdown, headquarters meltdown. Yeah, so the score really should have been 34-29 in my opinion. But it wasn't. It was a close game. I think Eli Stowers was brilliant for Vanderbilt. 130 yards, I believe, and a touchdown. 2 touchdowns, 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. He solidified. Wow, terrible voice crack there. He's solidified himself as a top tight end in this draft. He has tons of great catches. He's a good route runner, decent at blocking. And all around an explosive playmaker for Vanderbilt. He's been great for them the last 2 years when he's really shown his talent. And I think he had another great performance against Texas, and it's a name to look out for against Tennessee and if they potentially make the playoffs. Do they have a chance at the playoffs? I think they do. Now, they don't really have the tiebreaker against Texas anymore, but Texas is prone to a couple more losses. Vanderbilt could very much well finish the season 10-2. They have their last difficult game is at Tennessee to close it off. They have Kentucky and Auburn as their next 2 games. I think that Vanderbilt could win at Neyland. We've seen that Neyland, Tennessee can't really win there. With Texas, they still have Georgia and A&M. Those are 2 huge games. If they win that, they will 100% be in the playoffs. I don't know what that means for the SEC championship game. I know that means A&M would have a loss and Texas would have the tiebreaker, and Georgia would have 2 losses, so they could play Bama on that. That's definitely a playoff team if they go 10-2 or potentially even 11-2. But will they? Probably not. Playing at Georgia is not easy. They do host A&M, which makes their a little easier playing at DRK or DKR. I'm sorry to the Texas fans. I don't remember the initials of your stadium. But we'll see. And that could mean that Oklahoma would be in there, but they'll get killed by Bama soon. So don't really see that for them. But could be exciting. Who knows? They both have to win out. Like I said, maybe it would be a lot of fun if they do. I don't think they will, but it would be a lot of fun. I'd like to see it. You'd probably have 6 SEC teams. You'd have Georgia, A&M, Texas, Vandy, Bama, and Ole Miss. We're going to fiat that Oklahoma beats Mizzou and loses to Bama, so both teams would end up having 3 losses there. Otherwise, you might have a real issue where you might need 7 teams, and then you're really cramped. And then if you have the 6 team, if you have the 6 SEC teams, then you have the Big 12 ACC Group of 5, and then the 3 Big 10 teams in Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State. Notre Dame, in my opinion, should not make it then. If you have all of these 10-2 teams in the SEC, that's way better than a 10-2 Notre Dame team, especially by playing no one and losing to some of those SEC teams, and now a worse off Miami. That would be a lot of fun, is if we had all of those teams. I remember when I started doing these episodes, I came in with the mindset that I wouldn't really have SEC bias. But when you end up looking at which teams are most notable and which games are most exciting and which teams just generate the most to talk about, you find that it is the SEC. So I'm all for the SEC putting 6 teams in, maybe even 7 if you want like 6 or 7 teams. I'm so sorry. I apologize. I think that would be really fantastic. It would provide for a lot more exciting playoffs. I think a lot of those teams could have upsets on the road. One of them would host the Big 12 team, one of them would host the ACC team, and I think it would provide for a lot of excitement. So speaking of the SEC, we had one of the other ranked v ranked games. Oklahoma travels to Neyland, defeats them 33-27. And before I want to talk about the game itself, I want to talk about how this, in my mind, was the perfect college football game. This was my favorite game to watch all year. And the reason is not because of the gameplay itself. Well, it was a very exciting game, but everything was just so scenic. You have Neyland, you have the camera angle running out of the tee, Rocky Top blasting. I loved the blackout jerseys. I think they're fantastic. And the crowd had a great blackout as well. It was almost all black with a few specks of, neon orange. And it was a great game to watch. The crowd was so loud. It was like peak college football on a very nice November evening. I would have given a lot to be there. That seems like a bucket lister for sure. Neyland, not a checkerboard, but a blackout. In my mind, that seems just as cool. So shout out Tennessee, their program, their fans. It was a really, really cool game. But outside of the non-gameplay, the gameplay itself was also very interesting as well. You have John Mateer, who looks very unspectacular again. Ever since he's come back for this hand injury, he's not been the same. I remember people thought he was a Heisman contender. People thought he was the number 1 pick in the draft. He's not. I don't know where he's going to fall. I believe this is his last year as a grad transfer from Washington State. He's a second-round, maybe third-round player. I mean, we can ask Anch to do some mock drafts on that to see where the quarterbacks will land. I don't think he's going to be a first-round pick at this rate, especially with the other quarterbacks rising up the boards and Moore, Mendoza, and Simpson. But they did enough to get the job done. They survived. That's all Oklahoma's really just focused on, survive and advance. Tennessee picks up their 3rd loss. They're still ranked. They shouldn't be. That's a disgrace. John Mateer did, though, have 80 yards on the ground, and Xavier Robinson, the Oklahoma running back, had over 100 yards and a touchdown. So props to Xavier Robinson. Great week for him. On the other side of the ball, Joey Aguilar, so-so game. 300 yards, 2 turnovers, 3 touchdowns as well. Didn't do enough. It was always too little, too late. Even in the middle of the 3rd quarter, when Tennessee did take the lead 17-16, it always felt like Oklahoma had it under control. We've seen them kind of like keep their composure, and even though they did lose to Ole Miss after Ole Miss stormed back, we did see Oklahoma kind of establish their play style. We saw Oklahoma score 15 consecutive points. We saw Oklahoma go up 2 scores multiple times. Every time Tennessee cut the deficit, Oklahoma answered right back. Tennessee did score to make it a 1-possession game with like 3 minutes left, but you kind of knew the game was over there. Even after Xavier Robinson fumbled in the 3rd quarter, like I said, it still felt like Oklahoma had control of this game. Props to Venables on this one. They looked like a really, really complete team, bailing out their quarterback for not a spectacular air raid. He was okay on the ground, 80 yards. But yeah, a very, very complete Oklahoma win. Although I was praising Neyland like I was, it's a great environment, it's a great stadium, great fans. It's disappointing that Tennessee can't win, because I remember 2 years ago when Hendon Hooker was playing and they beat Bama there in the like 3v6, and then they were the number 1 seed and then they lost to Georgia. Like, that season was fun. I watched that team play in person at Vanderbilt Thanksgiving weekend. That team was fun. And that stadium was loud. The game was at Vanderbilt, but it was 80% Tennessee fans, maybe even 90. It's a shame that they can't win there because they have a great home field advantage. They should have beaten Georgia. They should find ways to beat Oklahoma. Play well for your fans, and they didn't do that. And they're out of the playoffs now because of it. And it's punishment that you can't drop these games to Georgia. 4th and 6, game on the line. All you have to do is don't give up a first down. You give up a 25-yard touchdown instead, and then you give up a 2-point conversion. And you miss multiple field goals in the game, including a game-winning 43-yard field goal, I believe. Self-inflicted wounds this season is what cost Tennessee. What's cost them against Alabama with the pick 6 on the 1-yard line. These things cannot happen, and they're so fixable as well. You don't have to give up a scoop and score in the 2nd quarter. it's just frustrating to see the way that Tennessee's gone out because they're a decent enough team. I don't think they should be ranked, but I think they're a top 25 team in the country. Doesn't mean they should be ranked as one, but it's really just disappointing. And you can argue that it has been a decent season for them because they could go 9-3, especially with all the Nico Iamaleava turmoil at the beginning of the year when he kept opting out and then transferring. What's going to happen? Then he transfers to UCLA, and then they bring in the UCLA quarterback and Joey Aguilar. You can argue that this season has been good enough, but you made the playoffs last year and you got pounded by Ohio State. So you think that you would want to build off of it. And next year, it's not looking pretty for them. I looked up their schedule earlier, their next year's schedule earlier today. They play Georgia Tech away, Vanderbilt away, A&M away, and then they host Bama, LSU, and Texas. They could go 6-6, and potentially even worse if they get upset by a different team. That's scary. That shows you the depth of the SEC. And they're not going to compete next year. I don't think they're better than like two of those teams. They could beat Georgia Tech depending on how they bounce back. They could maybe beat LSU. They're not beating Bama. They're not beating Texas. I don't think they'll beat Vandy or A&M. So Tennessee is in a difficult place. And again, we will still see them probably in the Citrus Bowl. Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. So tough luck. We'll see you next year at Rocky Top. Another team whose season is probably over, the Miami Hurricanes. And as a Hurricanes fan, I can't help but say I expect this. It's every damn year that they collapse in November. Last year we saw it against Syracuse and Georgia Tech. This year we see it against SMU and Louisville a few weeks ago. It's so frustrating. Mario Cristobal is just another version of James Franklin. He can't get it done. He couldn't get it done with Oregon. We saw them lose in constant Pac-12 championships to Washington and Utah. Like, oh my God, it's so painful. And I can't really talk much about this game because this was one of the most boring football games I've ever seen. Miami was in SMU territory on 9 separate drives and only finished with 20 points. Baffling. There was no really standout player besides Jordan Hudson, the wide receiver from SMU, who had over 100 yards. But yeah, so when I talk about the game, there's not really much I can say. I can go off on individual tangents. The fact that there's a 400% win percentage drop-off between August and October, and then November for the Canes under Cristobal, it's despicable. I don't think you fire him because they probably will finish 10-2, 9-3 with a loss to Pitt. But time's running up for Mario Cristobal. He's got to get it figured out, and he has the talent to do so. But I think one of the mistakes was where he went hunting in the portal for a quarterback. I know they wanted John Mateer. They eventually did not get him to Oklahoma. But Carson Beck, I think, is one of the most selfish players I think I've ever seen. He was unspectacular. He had one garbage interception in overtime and an unlucky interception off JoJo Trader's hands in the second quarter, I believe. Shut up. What are you saying in the press conference with SMU ran the same scheme the entire game? Guess what? You couldn't crack it. Are you kidding me? You scored 20 points and we're in their territory 9 times. Who cares what scheme they're running? Score some points. Win the game. You had your chances. There was a time when Miami was at the SMU 25, and by the end of the drive, they were punching from their own territory. You're not winning shit like that. And it's super frustrating. And some of the play calling was terrible. I think Cristobal is in on this. There was a play, it was 4th and 1 on the SMU 30 or 25. SMU stacking 9 in the box, and they run it up the middle with Mark Fletcher, who loses 2 yards for turnover and downs. Where's the creativity? You've got explosive playmakers. You have JoJo Trader, Elijah Lofton, Malachi Toney. Throw the ball. Do something. I think I had Cristobal over it. I don't think Shannon Dawson was doing that. So Cristobal's got to give it up. Know your role, buddy. Yeah, I think this was just an all-around disgusting performance from Miami. They have no path to the playoffs now. They have to win out and get a ton of help. They need a bunch of SEC teams to lose. They could use USC beating Oregon. They could use Notre Dame losing to Pitt and then Miami beating Pitt, and then that looks better. I I can't really see a path for them. I don't blame them. Underneath the sweatshirt, I am wearing a Miami Hurricanes Pop-Tarts Bowl shirt. It's a little chilly in my room, but I would otherwise take off the sweatshirt because that's where they're going to be again. They will be back in Orlando this year for the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I probably won't be there, but that I was there last time. It was very fun. Miami Hurricanes will see you next year. We'll see you in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And let's try and look for a quarterback that doesn't have attitude issues, can throw the ball downfield, and doesn't only throw bubble screens. Hopefully isn't a whiner, doesn't have an ego. Yeah. Well, Cavender thing was a real issue as well. That's why he was there, and then that ended real quick. Maybe it's revenge. Maybe it's revenge for him. I forget it was Hannah or Haley. I don't know. Maybe that's why Carson Beck is so bad and so entitled. Maybe he just wants to piss off whichever Cavender he was dating. I don't know. It was just another gutless effort from the November Miami Hurricanes. The last game that we will talk about individually is the other ranked game, Utah, Cincinnati. We're going to give some love to the Big 12 because the Big 12 is super exciting as well. We saw Utah curb stomp them. Score was 45-14. I caught glimpses of this game. I can't say I watched it in entirety, so I went back and watched the highlights, and that Utah offense is fun. Devin Dampier, 3 total touchdowns, 75 rushing yards as a quarterback, 215 yards, I believe, while passing, so not a great statistics-wise, but he looked really good if you watched that game. Ryan Davis, the Utah wide receiver, at 130 yards and a touchdown, and Wyshawn Parker, running back for Utah, 100 yards and a touchdown. Cincinnati could not stop them at all. It always seemed like just carving them up left and right. It was like watching a college team play a high school team. That's how easy it was for Utah to just carve them up. And even though on paper, Brendan Sorsby, the Cincinnati quarterback, he was 11 for 33, but still outthrew Devin Dampier, which is funny enough in terms of passing yards. So he had a 33% completion percentage, but had more passing yards than the Utah quarterback, which I think is a very hilarious stat. The Utah defense held Cincinnati to 6 drives with 3 plays or less. One of them had a first down and then a fumble. So 5 3-and-outs and then a turnover. That's amazing for them. But the one thing I'll say is, unfortunately for Utah, their season is still over. Like, that's what sucks about, just sucks in general, is that they played a great game, they look like a good team, and they have essentially nothing to play for. They've lost to both BYU and Texas Tech as their 2 conference losses. This was Cincinnati's first conference loss, so Cincinnati, even with this loss, is still ahead of Utah in the race for the Big 12 championship. Utah doesn't have a path to the playoffs, and it's really unfortunate because they are a good team. They could show up maybe at an upset in the first round. There's no place for them. As I mentioned, they've lost to the 2 teams that are front runners who are playing this week in what's going to be an amazing game. And then for Cincinnati, they still have a chance. They host BYU later in the season, so if BYU drops one to Texas Tech, actually, it doesn't even matter. If Cincinnati wins that game, they hold the tiebreaker over BYU anyway. So that would be a super, super interesting way to go. This is Cincinnati's 2nd overall loss. They did lose to Nebraska at the beginning of the season, but only 1 conference loss. So I think Cincinnati still has time to correct it. They totally could, and yeah, I think they have a chance. I'm sorry, Utes, but your season's still over. Yeah, sucks to suck. In other news, we have another fired head coach. Is like the 25th million of the season. Hugh Freeze of Auburn, to no surprise at all, has finally gotten fired. He's lost 4 of his last 5. He was 6-16 in 2+ years as head coach in conference play, so couldn't ever win a big game or any game for that matter. $15 million buyout, so way to get the bag. Another coach really just lucking out. There's no better job in the world than a fired college football coach. He really built a good team, in my opinion. They just couldn't find an answer at the quarterback position. I thought Jackson Arnold was going to be it. I thought they were going to beat Oklahoma. I thought that would have been a statement win. They really should have beaten Georgia, so got unlucky there. But you lost 10-3 to Kentucky at home. Yeah, you don't deserve anything. You definitely need to be fired. And they don't have any lighter schedule coming up. They're 4-5 now. They will finish 5-7. They still have Vandy on the road, and they host Bama on the last game of the season. Even though crazy things happen at Jordan-Hare, this Bama team's too good, and Auburn is in turmoil. I can't see that happening for them. So yeah, Auburn's in the mud. I don't really see anything happening with them. The ACC also had some exciting games. You saw Louisville and UVA starve off some upset-hungry teams in Cal and Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech and Cal. Louisville beat Virginia Tech and UVA beat Cal. Especially on the road. Those two teams are not easy to play against, and they still manage. So they're holding their own in the ACC. They still have a chance at the conference championship game and playoffs. So props to those two teams. You saw FSU bounce back in a huge way against the Demon Deacons. I thought that game was going to be close. FSU won by 35. So bad take on my part for sure. And we're going to get into the picks that I had. We're going to talk about the ones that I had last week, and I have a lot of picks this week. So Houston, absolutely shocking on the road. 13.5 did not cover. They lost by 10 at home to a garbage West Virginia team. And they really had no signs of life on defense. Connor Wegman played well, but not well enough. It's tough to win when your defense lets up 45. It's back to the old proper Big 12 games of 56-50. The ones that you would always see with Oklahoma playing whoever. Ole Miss did cover 12.5, which was good. So that's a prop for me. Wake Forest definitely did not cover 11. Nebraska did cover 4.5, and I had them at 6.5 when I filmed. So that was 2-2 last week, 6-6 on the year. A ton of picks this week. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 picks for this week. BYU plus 10. I think this line is way too high for two really competitive teams. Obviously, this game in Lubbock is going to be incredible. Just the mic a bit lower. I'm very glad that College Game Day is coming back to it. The 17th anniversary to the date of the first time it was in Lubbock. It's going to be an amazing game. I think it's by far the best game on the slate this week. I think it might be the only ranked versus ranked matchup, and it's a top 10 matchup as well. I hope they throw some tortillas. Decline the penalty, please, BYU. That would be fun. Let's get classic Texas Tech back. But I like BYU plus 10.5. The line seems too big. I don't think we know too much about either team, so I think it would be safer to assume this would be a close game. But not really a close game is when Ohio State travels to Purdue. And Purdue is 2-7 and looks absolutely lifeless, and Ohio State looks like a wrecking ball like they did last year, in the playoffs at least, not against Michigan. That line is 29.5. They could win by 50. And I know, yes, Purdue normally upsets teams, but they don't do it at night. They only do it at night, not during the day. This game is played at 12 o'clock, and Ohio State will destroy them. Vanderbilt will host Auburn. Line 6.5. Auburn just fired their coach. Vandy's looking to bounce back in a huge way to keep their playoff hopes alive. I could see them winning by 20. They probably won't. That's extreme, obviously, because there is some competition involved. But I think that Vanderbilt will handily take care of them. Give me Vanderbilt minus 6.5. Last week we saw Wake lose at FSU by 35. Somehow they play a better team in UVA. Yes, UVA has shown their signs of being frauds and whatnot, but this line is 6.5, and I don't think the Deacons are good enough for this. I like UVA minus 6.5. They could very well win by 35, just like Florida State did. And then also wouldn't surprise me if Wake turns out a close game. Last week was the first time that Wake trailed at halftime, so hopefully they might be able to fix their issues at the beginning of the game. And I don't think they will, though. I like UVA minus 6.5. Cal is a decent team. They're okay. They're 5-4. They've lost 2 close games in their last 2 weeks to Virginia Tech and UVA. But I think they're good enough to keep this game close. I think the bookmakers are really overvaluing Louisville, and I think this is a trap game. We've seen it in the past, and I think 21 is way too high. I would prefer this to be about 13.5, and then I would feel comfortable taking Louisville. So give me Cal at Louisville plus 21. And for my last pick, LSU versus Bama at Bama. This game is going to be a massacre. It's going to be ugly. And LSU just fired their coach. Bama is looking like the Bama of old with Nick Saban. And the line is only 9.5. They could win by 30 because they won by 30 last year at Death Valley with an incompetent LSU team and a mediocre, by Alabama standards, a mediocre Alabama team. And they're going to do it again. I see no chance for LSU here. I like Bama by 24. Like if this spread was like 20.5, I'd still take Bama. That's how confident I feel. I think it should be larger. I think if you get great value there. Bama also has never trailed after the first half. So I'm not sure what the first half spread is or the money line is, but if you want some decent value and a good trend, Bama in the first half for sure. They beat South Carolina in the first half. They beat Mizzou in the first half. The only time they didn't do that was with Vandy, and that game was tied at half. So I take back my earlier statement, is that they've never been trailing at half. We'll leave it at that. So with that, that's going to do it here on the college football edition of the No Huddle podcast. Some interesting games last week. Not as great of a slate this week, but hopefully we'll see a bunch of upsets like we did last week. Thank you for tuning in. If you've made it this far, really appreciate you. Go listen to this. Clips will be up on Instagram. Clips will be up on YouTube, Spotify, and TikTok. Hope you check them out. Like, comment, subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do. Hope you have a great week of watching football, and go Deeks.